We have an advisory panel that meets on a regular basis in regard to ACSIP. There's probably some of those members in here. And some of the things that we discussed has to do with coaching. And in some of my trips to Illinois, when I was meeting with Stephanie and Maureen and Sam Redding, one of my concerns was, how are we going to expect our schools to get better if we don't know as a district how to make appropriate coaching comments to that building level? So I think most of the panel, the advisory team, when we discuss coaching, we know the importance and value of knowing the correct way to do that. So that's why we set up these trainings, to give district personnel some ways and techniques and methods that they may use in knowing how to make appropriate coaching comments. The first part of this training will basically be going through the ACSIP process. Some of you may have already heard that, may already know that, but there's others that may not know what the process is. If you don't know what the process is the school has to go through, you're not going to know how to make appropriate coaching comments to that building. And then the second part of this will be about coaching comments. How do you do that in your role in your district? The two ladies that I have here with me today are both from Academic Development Institute, and I have Miss Maureen Ritchell, and I have Miss Stephanie Benedict, and I am getting ready to turn this over to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Good morning, everyone. We are going to talk this morning about the InduStar process and then how districts can support their schools. District leadership teams and school leadership teams will both work as teams to assess, create plans, monitor, and implement indicators of effective practice. So we're going to go through the process of how that works, and additionally how districts can utilize the information that schools input into the system to provide not just coaching comments, but support and feedback to their schools, and then utilize that information from their schools to make some choices about what district supports they need to be implementing in their districts themselves. So we are going to revisit leadership teams, roles, responsibilities, assessing, planning, creating tasks, all of that stuff. We're going to do some some activities today to kind of get you to communicate and collaborate among each other. We're also going to look at some modules. We have created a ton of research and resources for district and school leadership teams to be able to use to implement these processes in their buildings. So we're going to show you how to use them. You are going to use some of them today, so you can see just how easy they are to use. We're going to show you where you can find those resources, and then in this afternoon we're going to talk about how you can provide coaching feedback to your schools directly in the system, what you can see, what things you might be looking for. We have a few new reports out there that we'd love to show you, so this is going to make the system a little bit easier for you to work with. Okay. So just a little bit of background on what InduStar is. Yes, InduStar is a web-based platform where schools and districts can keep track of what they're doing in school improvement. You can keep track of your target dates, your plans, your tasks, all of that great information. But InduStar is more about a process. And so we're going to talk a lot today about leadership teams and conversations. The process is more important, honestly, than the platform. You can keep track of things all day long, but if you're not having real conversations and being realistic, consistent, and intentional about the decisions you're making on school improvement, you're not going to be able to sustain and get better at the processes in your building. So we're going to talk a lot about, you're going to hear me talk about leadership teams and conversations over and over today. So InduStar helps the platform as well as the process, helps roles be clear. Everybody has a responsibility. The state has a responsibility. The districts, principals, superintendents, teachers, instructional teams, they all have a role to play in this process. Industar has all of those pieces together in the system so that purpose is aligned, roles are clear, and partnerships and communication and collaboration start working hand in hand. Stephanie,
Can you go back to the that slide? Hello. Thrilled to be here. I love the warm, no pun intended, Arkansas welcome that I got here this week. But I hear it's going to cool down and you're going to have some great football weather on Saturday, right? I come from the southwest suburbs of Chicago, Palos Heights. But I really want to talk about this icon that Stephanie is using on these first two slides. The GPS, and in fact it's the Garmin. And I think that we've even elevated the practice of the GPS to Google Maps on our phones, which I think are even more accurate, right? And I want to slow down and pause here and think about the GPS because it's a tool that has made my life so much easier. I don't know about you. Can I get a thumbs up out there? I mean, if you're traveling around. I retired from the Illinois State Board of Education in 2011 and started doing this education consulting. And I work with the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Wyoming, Puerto Rico, and Illinois, but I couldn't do this job if I have to drive all over these states. I could not do this job if I didn't have Google Maps or GPS on my phone. I mean, it really does give me the step-by-step. So I can't imagine doing what I do now and trying to have done it 15 years ago. I would not have had the confidence or the courage to do that. And I have so many friends who say, you get in the car and you do what? You drive where? Like I was in South Dakota, where we were in Topeka last week, I was in Tulsa the week before, but a lot of it is just driving. And I feel so blessed to have the opportunity to see these parts of the country that I would have never gone to had I not had this role, but I could not do it without GPS. So the connection here to Industar is, as Stephanie said, it's a really cool, slick tool, but it's not about the tool. It is about the process. And, Industar is present in 22 states, and in Illinois, by the time I left the state board, about all of our 842 districts were using Industar at the district level, and our thousands of schools were also using it. And most of the users were opt-in users. We started out with Industar in Illinois, requiring our schools in status, in some sort of federal status, they were required to do their planning on Industar. But we had so many superintendents that said, oh gosh, if 3 of my schools are in status and they're using Industar, we call it Rising Star in Illinois, I want all of my schools to use it. So the numbers just kept growing and growing. But that being said, I just think I want to put this in the perspective of Common Core. When we think about Common Core, one of the biggest pushes is to make curriculum relevant for our students and to put it into context, right? And I know, I give this example all the time, I know I was a lousy math student, and I know if somebody would have put algebra, freshman algebra, in context for me and made it relevant, and explain to me that if you do a good job in this class, it might help be a bridge to lead you to other more advanced math classes that might get you a job in computer coding or programming, which I am totally fascinated by as an adult, but I don't have the background. But again, I had no idea why I was doing freshman algebra. If you start with the tool first, with the Industar tool, and just launch people into the tool, because the tool is slick and cool and it's really mesmerizing and it can do all this stuff to help you organize your life. But if you don't give them any context and relevance for why they're using the features in the tool, they forget pretty quickly about why they're engaged in continuous improvement planning at all. So I hope that sort of couches it for you, and we're going to keep revisiting these things over and over again today. Industar is like a GPS. It is so much better than a compass because it will give you turn-by-turn directions for school improvement on how to get better.
Okay. So this is the agenda for today. We are going to do an overview of Industar. We're going to talk about roles and responsibilities that folks play in the process. as well as look at the core functions, effective practices, and indicators. Everybody hears the term indicators, but sometimes it's not clear how the process works. Why there are so many indicators. There's 35 at the district level currently, there's 88 at the school level. How do we wrap our heads around an indicator and work through all of those? So we're going to give you some insight on how we suggest you work through the process. We're going to talk about teaming, how leadership teams work, how they should work. This is a team effort. There is absolutely no way one person could fill out the platform, submit it to the state, and make any kind of successful progress. This really is about leadership teams working together, being open and honest, and intentionally making decisions that will propel them forward. Additionally, we're going to talk about, with that, the continuous improvement process. So assessing indicators, figuring out where you're at right now, creating plans for where you need to be, creating tasks which will help you get there, and then talking about evidence and data and sustainability. This process is great when it works, but to keep it going and moving forward and to really build your progress, you have to think about sustainability. This isn't like the old annual plan where you may have done something and the next year you start over. And then you create some goals, do those goals, and then again start over the next year. We're talking about sustainable practices. So we really want to think about what can we do not only to implement these processes now, but how can we continue these processes for the future so we can just get better and better at the things that we're doing. And then of course we're going to talk about supporting the work. So how districts can support the work of their schools. How the state is supporting the work of the districts. And we are supporting the work of the state. So there is a huge effort in the state of Arkansas to continually build capacity. There is no way a state could do a process, any process, statewide, if we're not building capacity of others in the buildings, at the state level, at the district level. So we're going to talk about the partnerships there and building capacity. And with that, we're going to talk about districts having expectations for their schools, how districts can provide feedback and support for their schools, and then just how the state will provide feedback and support to you as well. Okay? And we're going to show you how to put those coaching comments and those support messages right into the system. There was a question from a gentleman at one of the Little Rock School District schools. He came to me at the school improvement conference and he said, I need to get my staff to understand what the difference is between the old process and the new process. And he said, could you give me some answers that I can tell them? And he knew the answers, he just wasn't sure how to relay that. So at the end of today, we're going to revisit this screen, and this will be one of the last activities of the day, to have a discussion at your table about how the process might be different from what you did before. Okay? So short of me answering it, I'm going to let you do that at the end.
Okay, I'd like you to look up at this slide, and let's see if I can't get an amen for some of these. How many of you can give an amen for a tool that has built-in flexibility? Yeah, can I get an amen? Okay. How about a process and tool that build local innovation? Yeah? Okay. And innovation is, you know, when we think about innovation, innovation is something that is disruptive. Things that are disruptive are not always comfortable. So we're going to disrupt some people's comfort out there by moving them into a continuous improvement process. It's not going to always be comfortable. But in order to achieve innovation, you have to be disruptive. When we think about innovation, think about coffee, how we have evolved with coffee. I mean, I think my grandparents went to the grocery, shoveled out some beans, put it in the grinder, and they got emptied into a bag, right? And then that bag sort of morphed into a can. Like, I don't even know, like our garage, My father was like famous for collecting coffee cans and storing his nails and screws and everything else in a coffee can, right? I don't even know if you can get a coffee can anymore, because then the tin coffee cans morph to what? Plastic, right? Okay, so I suppose you could still use those in your garage. But then we went from like the plastic coffee to what was the next innovation? So we had Mr. Coffee maybe in the 60s, and then we went from a percolator to Mr. Coffee, and the way coffee came in package was totally different. And then we evolved into what? From Mr. Coffee to like, what's the latest gadget that everybody has on their kitchen counters? Keurig, right? And not only can you make coffee, you can get tea, you can, you know. And then beyond Keurig, like what was like totally innovative for people? Like it came out of Seattle. Hello? Some of you probably have it sitting on the table, Starbucks. I mean, I don't know how many, like especially my son's age group, I mean, they're all walking around with a cup of coffee, right? And from Starbucks. So it sort of disrupted people's lives. It disrupted their routine, what they were used to. And disruption isn't always comfortable, but it is innovative. Can I get an amen for alignment to the research, a process that's already aligned to the research?
Amen.
Thanks, John. Hey, how many of you here have been involved in district and school improvement planning that was not continuous? It was somebody holding themselves up over a weekend, and they had to find all their own research. Okay, in the InduStar process, you have the wise ways. And I will always say, the wise ways are not the end-all and be-all of research, but they are a launch pad for the conversation that Stephanie referred to that we never had a launch pad for before. I mean, it was like a cognitive drain on us who were doing the school and district improvement plans. Literally, we had to go find our own research and back it up. Okay, the wise ways are a compilation, they were meta-analysis of all the research out there that showed us what high-performing districts and schools do to be high-performing. So how about an amen for a system that builds capacity at all levels? Okay, if you're in the role of a coach, if you're coaching people, you quite honestly are a capacity builder. Your job as a coach is to work yourself out of a job. But I guarantee you're gonna have another client down the road. They never go away. But you gotta work yourself out of a job with the clients that you are working with, hoping to take on somebody else. I know in Illinois, I told you that by the time I left the state board in 11, all of our districts and schools were using some form of Rising Star. Talk about having to build and scale up our capacity. I really applaud your state board of education, the folks who are working on your behalf, because they have the vision. They've had the vision knowing that they need to build capacity. They're a small team, they can't do it all alone. And also, it's pretty timely that you're all using InduStar, because with ESSA, this notion of capacity's got to be transferred over to the district level, doesn't it? For too long, we've been spotlighting the schools and kind of leaving out the district, and ultimately, it's the district who's responsible for the progress of their schools. So in Illinois, we figured out we couldn't work with the thousands of schools that we had. We had to transfer and build capacity at the district level to make the work manageable. Teams document what happens. Stay organized and on track. Set guidelines and expectations. Amen? Can I hear an amen?
Amen.
Are you afraid of expectations? My experience across the country is, and I would be a really wealthy woman if I got $1 for every time I said this. For some reason in education, we do a lot of apologizing. We're so sorry you have to do that. We're so sorry we're going to ask you to put this in your plan. We're so sorry, we're so sorry. Even though we know what best practice is, we're so fearful about asking districts and schools to rise to the occasion, to stretch them to their potential. We're always apologizing for it. And quite frankly, when I'm out in the field, often what I hear from the people in the trenches is, why don't they just tell me what they want me to do? I just want to know what the expectation is. I can rise to the occasion if you give me the opportunity, but they get mixed messages. So I think that your State Department is working really intentionally on clarifying the message and the expectation. this is so much better than yesterday. You guys can actually see the screen. We had a really small screen yesterday and the lights weren't good, so I'm really pleased with this. So I'm just gonna run through these. InDestar, this tool, and the process, it's just a structure to guide high quality work. I've talked about the research alignment. And in the Wise Ways, they've evolved over time since I first started using them. Now the Wise Ways has the indicator of effective practice at the top of the page. Underneath there's an explanation, sort of a deconstruction of the language of the indicator. And then underneath the explanation, there's some guiding questions for teams. So the explanation and the guiding questions weren't present, I would say, like 4 years ago. So that's a new improvement. Capacity, InDestar builds the district's capacity.
Effective practices, which are your goals? For the state, we had a conversation at the School Improvement Conference with the coaches and the state leaders. That is our focus. How can we help you implement these effective practices and build capacity? So again, we're trying to align all of our efforts at the state and ADI to help schools and districts implement some of these effective practices. There are 35 district level indicators. At the school, there are 88. Hope that doesn't make you panic. A school would never go through all 88 indicators in the first year or the second year or the third year. There are 88 indicators because that gives you choice. Every district is different, every school is different. All of the indicators are effective practices. They are research-based, things that highly effective schools and districts do. So there's nothing wrong with any of them. So we're giving schools and districts choice by giving you a larger menu. So at the school level, let's look at the core functions. There's of course school leadership and decision making, which talks about teaming, focusing the principal's role, aligning PD to instruction, all of the good things that you should be doing anyways, right? And then of course, remember, under each of those, we break that out into manageable indicators of effective practice. And when we get into the indicators, you'll notice that there's clusters of indicators. So if we're talking about establishing a team structure, there's indicators about leadership teams meet twice a month for at least an hour. That is your expectation, that is your goal. Okay, that is a successful practice that has been research-based that highly performing schools and districts. If they meet on a regular basis and they are consistent and intentional about what they do during those meetings, they can become more successful. Along with that, it doesn't kind of stop there. There's other things that all teams in the building, instructional teams, there's indicators about all teams having bylaws perhaps, all teams keeping meetings and agendas. So the indicators are very structural and clustered together to help you reach the ultimate goal of establishing a team structure in your buildings. We also have curriculum assessment, instructional planning, classroom instruction, family and community engagement, conditions for learning, and then the opportunity to learn, which is for college and career readiness. So we're going from early ed. There are some indicators about children transitioning from those pre-Ks into the classrooms. And then as some of those children who are going the junior, senior year, trying to get it ready for college and career. So there are, again, 88 indicators, and you might be thinking right now you have some schools that might be in different areas. They might have a different focus, might have a different goal or a different need. That's why we give you so many indicators. Stephanie,
Before you move on, I had a couple connecting thoughts to what Stephanie just shared with you. Number one, this big menu. You will get some pushback from people about 88 indicators, 35 indicators. I am of the age right now where there's 5 of us couples who try to get together frequently for dinner, go out for dinner. We're really blessed that we're all still together. But we're of the age where, Steve is gluten-free. Dennis has high blood pressure, so he can't have a lot of salt. I try to eat clean. I mean, we all have these special dietary needs, so we need to go to restaurants that have bigger menus. But the fact is, when we go to the restaurant with the bigger menu, we don't eat everything off the menu at one time. We're very selective in what we choose. We customize it for our dietary needs. So we're not afraid of a big menu. And I don't want your folks to be afraid of a big menu. And your menu of indicators might expand even further. I mean, we have a whole specific set of high school indicators that maybe your SEA will give some consideration to. There's a block of early childhood indicators. The whole idea is to make the choice fittable. And the other thought I have to that is, I remember I thought, what's sort of a cute story, when my son, when he's 29, but I think when he was about 10, he was getting into golf. And my husband and I were driving, he was in the back seat, and he had a good buddy whose dad was actually a golf pro. Played in a lot of tournaments, was pretty successful. But he was at one of the local clubs, and he said, "Mr. Vidovic has a tailor-made club for me." And I said, "Patrick." He said, "Well, we gotta go over there. He's got a tailor-made club for me, and he's gonna sell it to me for really cheap." I said, "So let me get this straight." I said, "You're gonna go get a tailor-made club and you could pick it up right now and pay him for it?" And he and my husband are looking at me, because I'm thinking tailor-made means that you gotta go and get this club and they've gotta make it, right? I didn't realize tailor-made was a brand of a golf club. So they're like, "What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "Well, I don't know that much about golf, obviously." But you're gonna be able to, the menu is such that districts and schools will be able to tailor-make their plans. There's gonna be enough choices there to make that plan fittable and doable for them.
Okay, this is just another reiteration of what we're going to talk about today. Teaming, which is up next, the continuous improvement process. We have tons, we've always had the wise ways. Again, we update the research often. A lot of times you want to see the latest and greatest research, the new book that came out, there might be a new John Hattie or something that came out, and that is what you want to engage with. A lot of times the research doesn't change. It's the same research, it's just somebody else wrote it, but we're willing to go and put the new person that wrote it in there. So we are keeping those updated. Resources, when we talk about resources, there are so many things that we have created in the past year that are beneficial to district and leadership teams, that engage them in the actual process. Our focus is really not on the platform itself, although we are trying to make it better and easier and more functional so that honestly you spend less time in the platform. We're trying to make it very easy and slick for you, just so you don't get lost and it's just kind of get it in there and you get it done. Our focus is really on the resources that we're giving you about the processes and the effective practices that are in the system. We're going to talk about sustainability. Again, that is crucial for this process to work. It's so frustrating when we see schools do such good work and districts do such good work, and they've worked really hard and they have done tasks and they've implemented these processes, and they haven't thought about sustainability. Because what happens? They have to start over. A year down the road, they kind of fall off the wagon and they have to start over. And that's very frustrating because there are things that you can do. And we're going to talk about some of those examples. What you can do to put measures in place that you can make these things sustainable. And then, of course, we're going to talk about how you can support your schools. There's a coaching comments feature in the system. We give you the ability to see what your schools are doing as far as their school improvement plans, and then we give you a place to provide them feedback. It's as simple as an instant message. You type your name in, you type the support. We're going to talk about what should be in that message box and what are some good ways of giving them feedback, some very effective ways. I will give you a hint. We are not going to give schools the answer. We're all about building capacity. A lot of times you're going to know the answer. Don't give it to them. Get them to find the answers themselves. So we're going to talk about question stems. We're going to talk about giving them next steps, asking them things, that you want them to figure out for themselves. So giving them some guidance and guiding questions